Good afternoon, and thank you for attending this session as the Cleveland Foundation annual meeting presented by KeyBank continues. I'm Helen Williams, Program Director at the Cleveland Foundation for Education. I'm pleased to present this breakout session, COVID-19, an opportunity to reshape education with my colleagues Eric Gordon, Shari, Obrenski, and Kevin Payton. Eric serves as Chief Executive Officer of the Cleveland Metropolitan School District, a position he's held for the past decade. Eric has been an educator for 29 years and is starting his 14th year at Cmsb later this month. Shari Obrenski has spent 23 of her 25 years in education in the Cleveland Metropolitan School District. Along with her high school teaching duties, for the past 15 years, Shari has served in various leadership positions within the Cleveland Teachers Union. This April, she was elected as president of the CTU. Kevin Payton has been an educator for the last 25 years as well, 19 of those within CMSD. For the past 7 years, Kevin has served as the principal of A.B. Hart, a pre-K to 8 CMSD school. Kevin has held the position of president of the Cleveland Council of Administrators and Supervisors since 2015. Together, these three individuals, with their 80 years of collective experience in leadership, have been at the forefront of Cleveland's effort to transform its schools. We are excited to have them today to share their insights in these challenging times. Please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to ask questions as we go, and we'll answer as many questions as we can at the end of today's presentation. I'm now going to hand it off to Eric to provide some background, so let's get started.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Helen, and to the Foundation for having us today to talk about this opportunity that COVID-19 has created. I want to just take a few minutes to start off by setting some context about the district and who we are, and then move quickly to a conversation with my colleagues Kevin and Shari, and Helen as well. So first, just to tell you a little bit about the district, we serve a school community of about 35,000 students. Those 35,000 students are part of about 27,000 families, and we have almost 7,000 educators across the organization at all levels. And we think of everybody as an educator, from the person that drives our bus, the person that checks us in security, the teacher, to the principal, to the CEO. And we serve these families in 93 brick and mortar schools, plus a number of other additional schools. Cleveland, as you heard Ron say in his speech, is one of the most segregated cities in our country. 86% of our students are children of color, 64% Black or African American, 16% Hispanic, and then a large variety of other nationalities, including immigrants and refugees. We also have the dubious distinction of the highest childhood poverty in the country, with 100% of our students receiving both free breakfast and lunch, and often snacks and dinners from us as well. Obviously, that means we face a lot of roadblocks associated with racism and poverty that plague not just Cleveland, but our country, and that have really been lifted up over the past several months, particularly with the murder of George Floyd and then the ongoing tragedies that seem to happen nearly daily. But our students also have incredible potential and real resiliency that gives us a great opportunity to build a better system for them. Shari, who is one of my colleagues here today, has said to her members, our educators, I don't know what this school year is going to look like, but I can tell you what it's not going to look like. It's not going to look like last year. And I say that to say that the three of us, as we've worked together, have worked with the spirit of we can't go back to what was, and maybe we don't have to go back to some of the things that aren't really what we want for kids. And so let's think about what we can do to go forward better together. And so that's the spirit of the way we've entered the work. As we went into the COVID-19 last March, we were told to close for a 3-week extended spring break with almost no warning, and then extended for the balance of the year. And so we spent a great deal of time supporting our families and our students, and working to prevent learning loss by keeping our students active and engaged. We opened 22 meal sites where we served our breakfast and lunch. Keep in mind that many of our families get 10 meals a week for each child from school, 5 breakfasts, 5 lunches per child. And to have all of a sudden that economic impact of suddenly having your child home and having to serve 10 more meals per week per child is not insignificant when you think about even your own food bill. We also work to move to remote learning. We're not a one-to-one district with technology, so we work to get a device into every home and to connect the more than 40% of our homes that did not have high-speed, reliable internet. We also did low-tech remote learning where we actually had content we mailed to homes so that kids could work in work packets and workbooks when they didn't have computers. We worked also aggressively to outreach and stay connected with our families both last spring and throughout the summer, and that continues to be a priority for us as we've entered into the fall. And then finally, we have had a very large team, including members of Kevin's organization, our principal association, Shari's organization, our teachers union, and many other constituencies, including students and parents, who have helped us to create our reopening plan for this coming school year, which for most of our students starts next Tuesday. We did this by focusing on 5 key principles that I personally thought were just absolutely critical as we thought about this work. The first is to make learning the constant and time the variable. In most schools and school districts, we think of things in Carnegie units, semesters, 180 days, 55-minute class periods, and everything is built around time. But time actually ought to be the flexible issue, and we should focus on what kids need to learn and how quickly they're learning it to get to mastery of content. Which leads to our second principle of setting rigorous, relevant, age-appropriate content mastery. We want kids to be wrestling with academically complex, group-worthy content that is worth their time to try to figure out, try to problem solve, try to learn. To do that, we need to have a much more personalized, learner-centered, inquiry-oriented kind of learning model, which you'll see and hear more about. And we know that our families and our students and our educators are going to need even more social and emotional supports as they work through this, but that they use those tools of self-regulation and relationship skills and persistence and those sorts of things in the presence of content that they're learning. And then finally, keeping in mind that every child is unique and that this is an opportunity for us to, again, more personalize the unique experience for that particular child as opposed to a kind of one-size-fits-all that classrooms were structured on in a more typical environment. We knew that we would have to be prepared for 3 physical settings based on COVID-19. I'll start actually on the right. Our goal is in-person learning. We want teachers and students back into learning spaces at school and in classrooms and out in our community, live and free from all that COVID-19 has restricted. But we knew we weren't going to be there soon, and certainly not this fall. So we focused mostly at first on a hybrid learning where teachers and students would engage in a combination of in-person learning at school and remote learning from home. And we envisioned that about half of our students would come to school on a given day. So Shari, who was a U.S. government teacher, would see half of her class on Monday and Tuesday, and then see the other half of that same class on Thursday and Friday, so that we could do all the social distancing and that sort of stuff. We ultimately ended up going to a complete remote learning environment where teachers and students will be engaging through an e-learning system or a virtual meeting platform. And I encourage people to think of this like your online banking portal, where everything is inside of that portal. How we came to the remote learning plan is that on July 24th, after studying 3 core sets of data, we decided that it was best to start our learning in the remote environment. The first was the public health data. The county at that time was in level 3, red. And if you know much about the health system, red is the highest level of spread. Purple only means that the health system can no longer keep up with that level of spread, but it's not actually a higher level. Red is the highest threat for COVID-19. We also know that Cleveland was getting worse during this period of time, not better. Things have gotten better in the community. That's a good sign. But at this particular point, we were seeing high spread and rapid growth. We also knew when we asked our families and caregivers and our staff that they were very concerned about returning to school. More than 2/3 of our families said that they were not at all comfortable or only slightly comfortable sending their children to school. So knowing that 2/3 of our families might elect a virtual option certainly mattered in our decision making. But the third, which I think will pay off and we'll talk about, is the ability to focus on a single delivery system of remote learning. In a hybrid environment, our teachers and principals would both have to learn how to deliver a new way of learning and teaching in the remote environment for kids who were home half the week, and simultaneously plan and deliver live content instruction. This fully remote environment actually gives us an opportunity for our educators to focus on really learning how to deliver high quality learning content remotely before we return to a blended model where they'll also get to see children face to face. So what does school look like this year? Our first day of school for most schools is next Tuesday, September 8th. And our students will have a common school day during the remote learning environment from 8:30 to 3 o'clock. Our school buildings are actually open from 8 to 4. Our offices are open for families, preferably with appointments. We have all the social distancing and active health checks in place. We do close the office from noon to 1 so that we can fit in both a lunch and a midday cleaning to keep the offices sanitized. Our students in K through 12 will spend about 3 hours a day on what we call synchronous learning. That's classes, that's online. We're in a synchronous environment now where we're going to interact directly with you. That will occur on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays. And then they will spend about another 2 to 3 hours on what's called asynchronous learning. And I would encourage you to think of that as good old-fashioned homework, projects you have to work on, maybe virtual field trips your teachers want you to take, watching a lesson again to make sure you understood the content. And again, that would be on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. We have reserved Wednesdays, the entire day, for asynchronous learning or projects, homework, things of that nature, so that our teachers have extra time to really do tutoring, small group support, family check-ins, grading and assessing content, and those sorts of things, as well as giving more time for our teachers to keep learning and adjusting to this new environment. Preschools will be about half of that, with about 90 minutes of synchronous class time and 90 minutes of homework kinds of activities. And rest assured, no preschooler is going to be sitting in front of a screen for 90 minutes. Teachers will break them up into small, manageable chunks and using touchscreen and very play-based learning kinds of activities. We are very, very focused on the importance of supporting our families. And so part of our remote plan for this fall includes 2 meal plans that are available for our families, either a daily pickup or a one-time-a-week pickup, plus weekend meal packages through a partnership with the food bank to make sure that our kids have the nutrition that they need. We're also working very deliberately to have personalized communications with our students and families, all the way from video, audio, messages that I communicate weekly to messages that come directly from principals in our schools, and all the way to teacher surveys where we're interviewing our families to find out their needs, their meal plan, their child care needs, whether they completed the census, whether they have registered to vote, and making sure they have the technology they need. We are working with out-of-school time providers and a great partnership with the Cleveland Foundation on providing on-site student supervision in our version of academic learning pods, where students who don't have supervision during the day could go for the day, be supervised to be able to do their schoolwork. And we'll be announcing those learning pods through a grant beginning next week. We are also expanding services for students with special needs, such as our students with disabilities. We've invested in telehealth technologies so that we can provide speech-language pathology, occupational therapy, physical therapy. We also have a cadre of teachers who will bring students in one-to-one settings or in very small group settings if they cannot learn in the remote environment. Our English learners, we have subscribed to a telephone translation service so that either the teacher or the parent can call the service, and there will be a translator that talks live, communicating between our immigrant and refugee families and their teachers and educators. And we also have deliberate supports for our foster and homeless youth, including partnerships with Laura's Home and other places where our young people live and go to school. And then we have worked all summer long and are in the distribution right now of one-to-one device technology so that every student has either an iPad, a Chromebook, or some similar device, as opposed to one per family, which was our goal last spring. So what's different, and the things that Shari and Kevin and I are wrestling with? First is the use of technology. As I mentioned, all of our students will have an individual device. We were not a one-to-one district a few short months ago. And so we have to really think about what opportunities that creates for our students, for our parents who now have more direct access to what their children are doing, and for our educators, and then also what trainings and supports are important to be in place for that. The use of time. You heard that our students will have shorter classes of what we call synchronous time or live face-to-face time, and longer asynchronous projects and activities and exercises and homework and that sort of thing. Teacher time is also used differently, so we have to think about staffing very differently. Teachers will need more time to curate and record content, to set up those virtual experiences that students work on at their own pace, to record lessons so that when a student can't be at the scheduled time with the teacher, that student can watch it later, and many other different uses of staff. We also have thought very differently about the role of community. COVID-19 has exposed the huge inequities that have existed in this community, but fortunately, and again with the Cleveland Foundation leading the way, the community response to address long-standing inequities like the digital divide, like meals and nutrition, things of that nature, have really been remarkable. Those out-of-school time care pods is another really great example. And then, as we mentioned, we are all really focused on the importance of building a deeper, better relationship with our students and families. And you will see and hear from all of us just a wide understanding that families have a very different appreciation for school. They have a lot bigger appreciation for what teachers do, but we also have to have a much deeper appreciation for what they've experienced and learned, and you'll see and hear a lot from us today about our efforts to deepen those relationships with their families. So thank you for letting me kick this off by just setting some context. I'm going to turn it back to Helen to set the stage for our conversation, and I look forward to chatting with Kevin and Shari about our work and answering your questions as well.
Thank you so much, Eric. So as Eric talked about, COVID is really a challenging time, but a time to really think about education differently. And I'd like to start with Kevin and Shari and ask them, as you've been working on this, creating the answer to COVID, what are the key pieces that you would like to see continue beyond COVID, and how do these contribute to equity and the success for our students? So Shari, I don't know if you want to start.
Sure.
I want this to be a conversation, not a panel type thing. So just everybody jump in.
Well, I think one of the exciting things that has come out of what has just in general been tragedy and difficulty is that we have become or are well on our way to becoming a one-to-one district in terms of each student having access to technology. That is something that a year ago I never would have dreamed that we would be in this position, which is very exciting. I know as a classroom educator for 22 years, I would really have loved for all of my students to have had access to a device so that when they weren't with me, I was able to utilize technology in the work that they were doing outside of the classroom and trying to provide more engaging opportunities for them. And also being able to use technology inside the classroom on a regular basis, again, to make the classes more stimulating and exciting for students, and also to provide them with similar opportunities that we see with their more affluent peers. I think that taking this step, and Eric has been amazing in getting out front really in terms of the technology divide and talking about the digital divide, and having the district step up to ensure that students not only have devices but have internet connectivity in their homes. And I think this positions us well to have our students, as we move forward, really become the true digital natives that many of their peers are, that have access to this technology as a course of their daily life. So this is an exciting sort of unintended positive consequence of what we've been seeing.
But Helen, to your point, it isn't yet something that will continue unless we actually solve the connectivity issues. So we have bought ourselves a year. We bought hotspots that have a subscription to them, but at some point that subscription expires. And so as a community, one of the things we have to do is create permanent high-speed, reliable internet as a utility available to all, and not a luxury for some, because I don't plan to be the superintendent, Kevin and Shari don't plan to be the educators that go out to homes and say, give me that hotspot back, COVID's gone. So we've got a problem to solve to take advantage of this opportunity that was created.
And one other thing that the COVID-19 has created, it actually started the process of the educational reform, and which means that what are we going to do differently and what do we want to continue to do? As a principal perspective, with the one-on-one technology, that's great. And it gives every student equal and equitable access to education. So I know the school, we adopted this program called Schoology, which now each child can view their teacher's lesson, and not just they can view the teacher's lesson, that if they don't get it, and they're recorded. If they don't get it, they can continue to replay it 1 or 2 or 3 times until they can actually say, oh, okay, I didn't get what the teacher said the first time, but they get to replay the delivery and really get that mastery learning that they can get otherwise. But the technology and the education is really significant with the equal and equitable access to what these students have. But we're really excited. Also, another point from the principal's perspective is that with having technology in the homes, and I know our parents are busy sometimes, we can actually continue and do Zoom conversations with their parents with IEP meetings or whatnot. That's something we would love to continue or to have after COVID-19, because, a lot of parents they don't drive, they can't come to the school, and then they could do the Zoom meetings with the child there or they're at home, and they're in that space that feels comfortable to them as well. So that's a couple of examples of our technology, how we can use it, especially at the principal's lens.
I want to echo what Kevin said about the opportunity to engage differently with parents using these technologies. Once we have the devices in the home and the parents connected, we now have ways to make engaging with teachers and their school community so much easier. And we've all learned in these last several months how to live in this world. And so we can take that and pull that forward to make what is often a really inconvenient experience for people who are, first responders, working multiple jobs, a much easier relationship with their teachers and their principals. We're really excited about that.
Yeah, I think Zoom and Teams is everyone's new best friend.
Yeah.
So what do some of these changes mean for the constituencies you represent? Shari for teachers, Kevin for principals, Eric for central office. How do you have to do things differently now, and how are you addressing those challenges?
Well, I think this year it is a situation where whether you have been a teacher for 30 years or you've been a teacher for 3 weeks, you're about on the same playing field in terms of being able to understand how to use all of the technology. We've had about 2.5 weeks of professional development, working on the new learning platform, as well as learning different applications that we're going to have access to with our students. And I know that many teachers and our paraprofessionals and other educators are working diligently trying to internalize everything that they've learned how to make all of this happen for their kids. There are, and this is something that's happening in Cleveland, but also lots of places nationwide. Lots of tears going on with just the frustration and being overwhelmed, but at the same time, there is just this level of excitement at doing things in a different way. I've never seen so many Bitmoji classrooms in my entire life. I never knew what a Bitmoji classroom was until a few months ago, and people creating their Bitmojis and designing their classrooms and then trying to figure out how all of these things work together. It's an exciting time, but it's also very, very challenging. And one of the things that I think we need to communicate to everyone in the community is that we really are all learning together. This is something we've never done our jobs in this way before, and where, like I said, I was a classroom educator for 22 years in Cleveland. We all had sort of our opening routines, and we knew exactly what we were doing, and we were very comfortable in that, certainly comfortable in our own skin in our classrooms. Many of us have never felt this way since the opening days and weeks of school, our very first time around. So it is a challenge. It is frightening, but it's also really exciting. And the aha moments, we have, of course, all of these online communities, and following what everyone is saying and saying, hey, do you know how to do this? Do you know how to do this? Hey, I'm sharing this with you. I found this out. I've got this great video. It's just this excitement in some ways that I haven't seen in a long time, because we are doing things in such a new and different way. So it takes a lot more time, in part because of the learning curve. The learning curve is steep, but also in part because doing online remote learning is much more time consuming in terms of planning than it is for regular face-to-face teaching. And though I can't explain exactly why that is, again, I think part of it is that we're just it's not natural to us at this point. I think the other part of it is that you really are being more, you're individualizing what you're doing with each student a lot more than you might in a more whole classroom setting, because you are designing instruction for each individual student and making assignments for them in Schoology that are more directed to the areas in which they need more assistance. And so it just takes more time and effort.
One of the challenging parts for the principal's perspective is, each year we get our buildings grow, so we need new teachers. So we're to build those relationships with those teachers, new staff members, with new families. It's kind of hard to build relationships through the internet or just through Zoom, but and also in supporting those families and supporting those teachers if they're not that savvy with technology and whatnot. So it's just like we have to walk them through it. But other than that, it's an exciting time to change our practice of what we've been doing and doing something different. And like Shari said, we're all learning together. And once we all can establish that and feel comfortable to be uncomfortable, this whole thing will work. And I think it will work out great. CEO Gordon has done a lot of things for the teachers, for the principals, to support us to the point that we feel comfortable on September 8th, opening up our schools to make sure each child has the best education that they have right there at their home.
The challenge that you heard it from both Kevin and Shari, the challenge just requires some grace. We have to all work together. The reason our opening plan is only a 9-week plan is because we can hang on to each other for 9 weeks, and we're going to get through this, and we're going to figure it out, and we're going to improve. You've heard about our portal Schoology a number of times. Consider this. Schoology did not exist on July 24th, and we will be teaching in it next Tuesday. That means that we had to figure out how to support principals who needed to help their teachers, how to help teachers who need to help their parents and kids, how to get parents and kids connected into it, how to integrate it into all of our systems, and all of that has happened in a month. but it also requires grace. And I think one of the things I'm most proud of, one of the things I am most proud of when you look around the country at how so many school systems have fought with their associations and their unions about what they were or weren't going to do. We have collaborated through some really tough decisions, but every one of them collaboratively. We each meet weekly. The three of us meet every other week together to make sure that our three bodies of work are integrated. And we've worked through some really tough stuff to stand up the schooling that our kids and families are going to experience next week.
Yeah.
So I have to say, as a Clevelander, it's really exciting to hear how you're working together, how excited you are, and how you're really, figuring out, you're building the plane as you fly it, so to speak. But what are the barriers you're facing? What are the barriers for incorporating some of these changes as we move forward? And how can the community help in addressing any of those barriers?
Well, I'll start because I have to do it at a systems level, and there are two really significant ones. This isn't cheap. We have spent now over $18 million that we did not have and did not budget for in outfitting students with technology, and we have not solved the problem because we're about to find out next week that the people who thought their internet at home was strong enough isn't when you have three kids and mom or dad on it all at the same time. So there's a second wave coming. And we haven't solved this larger digital divide, which, by the way, people keep attributing to schools. It is not a school issue. We told people when this state locked down, go home, get on your internet to apply for unemployment because the unemployment office is closed. Get on your internet to go to the doctor because we don't want you going to your doctor. So we have a problem, whether you have children or not, that we have to solve, and it's an expensive one. And we are robbing Peter to pay Paul. We are dipping into next semester with the hope that we will get the support we need, not only from our school levy, which is critical to our planned operations, but from stimulus relief from the federal government at a time of economic crisis that is looming. The second, and frankly the one I'm more worried about, is we are doing some really innovative stuff. We're trying to move the needle. You heard Shari talk about the much more personalized learning, all of us talking about the devices. But if the state and federal policy context stays rigidly in place and we're just forced to go back to what was, we will not create a more fair, just, and good system because we won't be permitted to. And we've seen, regardless of politics, we've seen efforts to force schools to reopen like they were without realizing that to get back to live learning, we're going to have to do things differently. And in our own state context, the waivers we've been given are still driven by things like seat time. So we still have to account for how are you getting 180 hours of seat time as if time is more important than learning, instead of actually saying, show me how Shari learned what she's supposed to. Prove to me that Kevin knows what he's expected to know. So policy is going to be really critical, and that's another place where our community can play a big role.
Sure, Kevin, you want to add anything?
So one thing I would like to see the community after this is all over, to continue to have the same access that Cmsd has as far as Schoology or whatnot. So if students that get suspended from school, instead of just sitting at home, they could go to one of these centers and get that tutorial help or get that internet and that computer access with somebody actually there helping them through it as well. Also, use these community centers as a place where parents can go and learn how to be savvy with the computer so they can even help their child as well at home when these places are closed.
So let me open it up. We have several questions from people in the audience, so I'll just start throwing some of these out. The first really is about the governor recently decided to allow child care providers to provide safe places to do remote education. Are you thinking about how CMSD can collaborate on that effort? Eric, I think that's to you.
Yeah, we already deeply collaborate with the out-of-school time providers and childcare for 3 and 4-year-olds, particularly through our Pre-for-CLE effort, which is our public-private partnership. And I would just say that is one example of why Cleveland is established as a school district in a city that will emerge better, is because of a decade of partnerships and innovations like Pre-for-CLE is one example.
Great. This is a question for all of you. How do you think Say Yes is affected by COVID-19?
It's more important than ever. People need help, and we need to have that help available to kids and families directly at school.
And I think I think it is more challenging in schools that are just coming online this year. Again, this is all about relationships. I mean, everything in education is really about relationships. And so when you are talking about being in a remote space, even with video conferencing, it's still not the same as the in-person experience. And I probably should have said this a long time ago, but we miss our kids. I mean, we all miss our kids, whether you're teachers or paraprofessionals, our related service providers, our administrators, we all miss seeing our kids, being able to be near our students and working with them, and being able, it's just easier to build relationships that way. But even with those schools that are just coming online this year, like Eric said, Say Yes and integrating all of those supports with students through the lens of our schools is more important than ever. And I think we're just excited to continue to see how Say Yes grows and becomes an integral part of our school community, and something that is just sort of a natural process. And so we look forward to the schools that have already been online growing more this year, and are excited about the schools that are just coming online this year.
And there are 42 schools online this year, right, that are going to be, our Say Yes schools are going to be getting the coordinated services in the buildings. I can say on the scholarship side, which is the other side of Say Yes, that kids are applying for schools, they're applying for scholarships. The scholarship board has made some accommodations for COVID in terms of extending the time that students can use scholarships. So we are ahead of our colleagues in the rest of the country in terms of FAFSA completions and kids enrolling in college. This is a really, I think, important question. How will you use this time to make anti-racism and bias training mandatory or ongoing for all Cmsb educators and administrators? I mean, I know this is something the district has been talking about.
Yeah, this is an issue we've been working on for 4 years. We've adopted a declaration for inclusivity. Kevin, Shari, and I are actually standing up book discussion groups that our educators can really talk about, our space and place in this work. Those of us who are white, those of us who are men, what is the difference if you're a person of color, if you're female, those sorts of things. So we are using the opportunity. I think the difference is that we get to design the system differently too, instead of using the opportunity to push from inside the system. And it goes back to where I started. We can't go back to what was, even if we wanted to. We're asking ourselves, what do we want? And how do we get there? So how do we make a more fair, just, and good system for children of color, or for any other number of things that create disparities in our community?
Yeah, and I know when, right after the murder of George Floyd, Eric came out with a very strong statement. CTU actually came out with a statement as well. As an organization, we have committed ourselves to bringing economic and racial equality into our system and working toward that in our community. So I think that we have the will behind it, and now it's just a matter of continuing and building upon action to make sure that is visible and really making change. And so I think that we are partners in this. We have the same commitment toward this, and we really want to make sure that we are working collectively to end the systemic racism that we see in many of our systems, both within education and within our greater community.
Yeah, and as a principal, each principal represents a community, and the only thing we can really do is have these conversations and have it with our staff. For instance, I'm having a book study with my staff about the racial unjust that's going on in our country, and what we can do as educators to inform our students and just start there to change the process. But what we can do is just really just talk about it. Again, being uncomfortable and being comfortable being uncomfortable. Talking about the issues that's actually coming every day. And as an African American principal, I've had challenges throughout my whole life. Going through education, and I could use and I could share those experiences with my teachers and my students, as well as my families. But to build upon them and to make sure our families are having a great education while we go through this social unjust.
Thank you, Kevin. We're getting toward the end, and I just wanted to thank you again for attending today's session. I want to thank the panelists and ask everyone to give them a virtual round of applause. As I said before, I'm feeling very hopeful as a Clevelander as I see these changes and sort of the excitement as you meet these challenges. After this, to the audience, you'll receive an invitation to take a brief community survey. We greatly value your feedback, so please consider sharing your thoughts on today's events, as well as your vision for Greater Cleveland. Again, thank you. Eric, I'll give you one final word, a minute.
Well, I just want to say, like I said, it's about caring for each other and having grace. We will see the other end of this, and this is an opportunity that my colleagues and I see to make a more fair, just, and good system of education for Cleveland's children. So thanks for having us today, Helen.
Great. So there's also time to register for more exciting annual meeting week activities on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Please check out the rest of the series at www.clevelandfoundation.org/annual meeting, and have a great afternoon.